Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. Today I'm joined again by Grandmaster Hackworth, 9-3 Black Belt in Hapkido, and the head instructor of American Dragon Martial Arts Academies. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And for those of you watching around the country, please drop us a comment. Let us know where you're from. We'd love to see how far our reach is going. And also, our YouTube statistics show, at least on my channel, that 76% of the people watching aren't subscribers. So if you're not a subscriber yet, please go ahead and do that. And be sure to share this with your friends.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, thank you for doing that. Um, we wanted to talk. We actually did this recording before. Unfortunately, it didn't come out, so we wanted to rehash this topic, which I feel like is invaluable. And the initial topic that we were going to discuss were the benefits of the martial arts lifestyle for students and instructors. But over the course of our conversation, you told us about the 7 steps to black belt leadership discipline. And I feel like that is some really invaluable stuff for our viewers to hear. So why don't we start there? Grandmaster, what are the 7 steps to black belt leadership?
Well, the 7 steps to black belt level discipline are: first, you want to make and keep a morning commitment to yourself every single day. You start every day with an act of self-discipline, whether it's just getting a drink of water every morning or getting a little sunlight, letting the dog out, whatever it is. Make sure you do something every single morning. It requires you to get off the bed, turn off the alarm, and go move around. And once you make that habit, then it just continues with other steps to your day. And I know a lot of people have complicated morning routines, do a cold plunge and all those things. My basic morning routine to for my discipline is to get up. I'm going to get a drink of water. I go outside, get a few minutes of sunlight while I let the dogs out with me, and then I do some exercise, whether it's breathing exercises, some stretching, just something to get the blood circulating before I start my day. And once you make that habit of getting up and taking action, then you feel better about yourself, because the sooner you accomplish something in the day, it sets you up for success for the rest of the day. But if you just keep smacking the snooze alarm, laying there, start scrolling Instagram or something, then you know that you don't feel good about doing that because you haven't accomplished anything yet. And especially if you're scrolling the news, you're just going to get upset. So let's, start something positive with our own actions. And then I think this,
That if I can
yeah, go
just
ahead.
jump in there, I feel like that's such wise advice. One of the things I tend to do to help me get up in the morning is just start running through all the exercises and activities and things that I have to get done that day that can help me. Once you start kind of thinking about those things, it can help get you up, get you motivated. And I always feel like it's not a great day unless I can get some stuff accomplished. And when you can get that knocked out early on in the day, it just makes you feel like you're really powering through. So, starting with a workout too can be really powerful as well.
Yeah, and I think that, like for me, an important part of it is step two, and I call it the anti-discipline approach. And it's not to do something else; it's to remove something else. Get rid of something that was a bad habit, whether it was scrolling on your phone first thing in the morning, or having a cup of coffee first thing instead of getting up and getting some water in your system and whatever. If you take away a negative, if you remove a bad habit and replace it with a positive action, then that sets you up for more good self-discipline. And we tell the parents, that we want their children to learn self-discipline. And the difference is, discipline is, you have a child and you tell them to do something and they do it. No complaint. That's discipline. What we want is self-discipline. Self-discipline is when they understand that even as a child, they have responsibilities, and they do those responsibilities without being told. Whether it's make their bed, feed the dog, whatever it is, they do their responsibilities without being told. And I think that that sets them up for a great lifelong habit of doing things not because they want to, but because they know they're supposed to. It goes back to a thing, and I heard Dave Kovart say this, that his father told him the same thing. So I guess it's from that generation. But I remember one time telling my dad something, there was something I didn't want to do. And he said, son, you don't have to want to do it, but you're gonna do it. And that's a great lesson in self-discipline that some things just need to be done, whether you wanted to do them or not. And the great thing is that I learned early on that when I did those things, it made me realize that if I can do things that I don't want to do, then I can certainly take action on the action steps to achieve the goals for things that I do want. It's a no-brainer. So you realize that you, through your own self-discipline, through your own self-responsibility, have the largest influence over the results in your life. It's not your peer pressure, it's not outside influences. You have the most influence over your life.
Reminds me so much of something my master once told me. I had a really strong roundhouse kick on one side of my body, and I tended to use it all the time. He came up to me and he said, Michael, you need to work on both sides of your body. Take your worst technique and make it your best. And that was really great advice for making me more well-rounded. But what I guess I'm realizing right now as I'm listening to what you're saying is it's also going to teach me to do the things that I don't want to do. The reason why I'm doing my right side roundhouse kick is because I'm more proficient on that side, so it feels good to throw that kick.
Right.
But, even though it doesn't feel quite as good to do my left side, it's underdeveloped and I need to work on that side so that I can be a better martial artist.
Yeah. And I think that that is a good thing to learn in anything, whether it's academics or physical skills, sports. And it reminds me of, I think that this is probably something that a lot of instructors focus on is developing and overcoming weaknesses. And when I was a student of Grandmaster Chun at his Hapkido school in Pyeongtaek, um, he would actually take class time and tell us, okay, for the next 10 minutes, work your weaknesses. And so it became a habit of that was our daily self improvement in class, whether we had planned to do it or not. Now you're going to focus on your weaknesses. And I always felt good at the end of that 10 minutes, like, okay, I am getting better at this. And so as we see our own progress and we realize that overcoming these obstacles makes us better, and it's there's less resistance on our part. I don't know if I
Yeah,
said
yeah,
that
no,
very clearly, but yeah.
absolutely.
And so going in a little deeper on the 7 steps to black belt level discipline, the third thing I tell people to do is adjust their wake up time. So if you normally wake
Mhm.
up at 7 a.m., don't immediately try to jump to waking up at 5 a.m. because you're not going to be prepared for that. You want to gradually do it. Like get up 15 minutes earlier so that you can do that self discipline exercise for just 10 or 15 minutes to get your day started. And over time, I did work down to where I am up at 4:30. If you watch my Facebook posts, you'll see sometimes I'm doing my scheduled posts at 4:30 in the morning and getting things out there 5 a.m. Going for my walk. And it just became one of those things where I learned that okay, I'm going to go to bed at a reasonable time because as my mom always said, nothing good ever happens after 10 p.m. So go ahead and get your rest. But if you adjust your wake up time and start taking action first thing, that is going to be a huge leap in the right direction for growing your level of self discipline.
Yes, yeah. Well, I think that touches on another aspect of trying to put your life in order, which is that a lot of people try to do too much too fast. I had a kid who was in my leadership program, and he was a really nice kid. He had a great attitude, a lot of charisma, and he was technically very proficient, but he wasn't doing very good at school. And I said, well, if you want to be on our leadership team, you got to do well at school and, here in the dojo. And he said, I'm going to get all straight A's this year. And I said, well, what kind of grades are you getting right now? And he's like, well, I only passed one class. And I'm like, okay, let's just work on getting like C's, like
Yeah.
this is too much. And sure enough, he didn't get straight A's. He didn't even get close. But, C's would have been a better place to put him because he did get about C's and I think he got one B, but then he would have felt like he had accomplished his goal. But if you put it too high, it can be a crushing defeat when you don't get up there.
I agree with that. That's for sure. And then on the fourth level of the steps to black belt level discipline, the fourth step rather, is to create a disciplined lifestyle. And the first step to that is through nutrition. And I feel horrible right off the top of my head. I can't remember if it was Aristotle or who it was that made the comment that, self-discipline, uh, if you can control what you put in your mouth, what you eat and drink, then you can control anything else, because that's one of the biggest weaknesses. You see people all of a sudden, they weren't thinking about cake, but if somebody offers them a piece, they're like, yeah, absolutely, even though they know they probably shouldn't eat it. And so, and one of the things that I had to do was get in the habit of making the nutrition aspect family, a part of our family lifestyle, because it was a little hard for me, to focus on my nutrition if I've got the kids bringing in boxes of Oreos and chips and all these other unhealthy things. So we just made it to where the self discipline was part of our family's lifestyle, and starting with the nutrition. And like I said, people can go back through my Facebook page and see pictures of me from some years back where, because of an injury, I gained a lot of weight. At one point, I weighed 430 pounds. And as of today, I weigh myself every morning, I weigh 162. And so that's a big difference. That's over 280 pounds. Uh,
Yes, sir. That's amazing.
yeah. So in in the thing I tell people, I'm like, if I can do it, you can do it. I mean, it was 3 pounds a week on average, 2 to 3 pounds a week. Over 18 months, it adds up, you know? And so in the more I lost, like the more committed I felt, because it was hard to say, well, I'm just going to have this bad thing. When I realized, like, I'm going to feel lethargic after that. If I don't have like a salad before a slice of pizza to actually make it a meal, then afterwards, all those carbs are going to hit in my system, and I'm just going to let my blood sugar will skyrocket, and I'll be ready to fall asleep. But and that's all part of like a lifestyle. I call it, as far as the nutrition goes, we talk about the standard American diet, and I say the acronym for that is SAD, because if you're eating the standard American diet, that's what you're going to be: overweight, sad, depressed. And just over the years, I've watched it like through the media. So, like when I was a kid, they didn't have Domino's delivering just pizza. If you went out to a pizza restaurant, you started with salad, breadsticks, a bowl of soup, and then you had a piece of pizza. You didn't sit down and eat an entire medium or large pizza by yourself. It just wasn't heard of. And if you did, your friends would ask you, what's wrong with you? So it's interesting to watch how the marketing has affected the lifestyle and the health of our country overall. And unfortunately, we influence the rest of the world because teenagers all across Europe and Asia want to mimic the American lifestyle because they think that's being cool. And it's far from being cool. I can tell
Yeah,
you
that's
that.
so true. We have, I think it's like 34 or 35% obesity, which is kind of insane. And in Korea, they have 3% obesity.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with our food. This is true. But I also think the culture can make a big impact on your trajectory there. So, like in Korea, there is they have healthier food. They make almost everything from scratch, and I think that does really impact people's weight. But there's also a pervasive culture that if you're overweight, and I don't mean this is not coming from me. I'm just saying this is that culture that you're lazy and that you need to go work out. And people will be kind of pretty forward about if you're overweight, like, hey, and I'm not even saying like a lot overweight, like even just a little
Yeah.
tummy or something, people will come up to you and tell you, hey, you need to
Oh,
lose
yeah.
weight, you
Yeah.
you need to work out. My own master, I was I had some pictures up on Facebook and he calls me up. He says, hey, you know, Michael was my name I used to go by when I was a kid. Michael, uh, you're looking overweight. Lose some weight, and it just
Yeah.
calls me up out of the blue to tell me that.
Yeah.
And it's this culture that really helps everyone stay thin. I'm not saying we have to go that far. I believe that American culture, valuing people's privacy and trying to be polite, I think is really important. But I also think people need to hold themselves accountable to maintaining good fitness, or it can very easily get away from you. What you're saying about nutrition is so important. When I was younger, I didn't think anything of it. I could eat whatever I wanted because I was working out all the time. Just even going down the street, I wouldn't walk down the street. I would sprint against my buddy. Just everything I was doing was athletic and I was just full steam ahead. So I could eat anything. But as I've gotten older, I realized, wow, it's really important what you eat. And when I was in my late 20s, I got diagnosed with arthritis. And I've been through a lot of different prescriptions and things like that. And honestly, at this point, I'm realizing that nutrition is more important to that than anything. And it just goes to show how important nutrition is. It really is, makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and you hit some very valid points there. And one of the other things about the culture was that so I remember being in Korea in I think it was 2019. We all went out to dinner, and I was getting a little tired of drinking water because in Korea, if you're drinking water, you go get it yourself. And
Hmm.
so I was getting a soda. I asked him, "Do you have like Diet Coke?" And the girl was like, "No, what is that?" And so instead of trying to figure out how to explain what diabetes is in Korean, I just said, if you're trying to lose weight, you want Diet Coke because it doesn't have sugar. And and you know what she said? Basically, she was like, "Look, Chubby, if you want to lose weight, just drink water." And it was funny because she said it with a smile, and her tone of voice was like, not, she wasn't trying to be hurtful. It was just like being friendly. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I just thought that she just thought she came up with this golden nugget of wisdom to share with me. Just drink water and you'll
Yeah.
be able to lose weight. And I just thought that was hilarious. And then the other thing is when you're talking about diet as a kid, oh my gosh, it was so bad. I remember if I was unsupervised, I would do things like put sugar on my macaroni and cheese, things like that. And I look back at it now and I'm like, no wonder, I would get these energy crashes as a kid. But and the same thing goes for adults. I see a lot of people who go out to order a cup of coffee and they'll add like 8 tablespoons of sugar. I'm like, you're drinking black syrup. What is that? 8 tablespoons of sugar
I
or
go
teaspoons rather? Yeah.
I go to the
And
coffee shop, with my family,
yeah.
and it's quite expensive. One of those drinks is like $8 by the time you get out of there with taxes and stuff. So I always just buy black coffee. I'll just get a tall black coffee. It's like 250, $3 or something, and I walk out. But then, of course, like everyone else in my family wants the, caramel macchiato and blah blah blah. It's like, and that's how they get you. I'll sit there and I'm like, I think I'm the only person going to Starbucks and just getting black coffee. I think everyone else is getting like those frou-frou-y, like,
Yeah.
so much sugar and cream. And yeah, that's a lot of calories and a
And
lot
the
of
black coffee,
sugar.
they call that cafe Americano. Is that the one you're talking about? It's just regular coffee.
Yeah, no, well, I usually get the, like at Starbucks, I'll get the, just the, what's it called? The, medium roast or whatnot, like, Americana. Americano is where they do like a shot of espresso and water. So maybe that's what you're thinking of. Like in Korea, that's
Oh,
what I'd have
maybe.
to get because they didn't have drip coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the other thing is when you're talking about like going out with your friends and family, is that the accountability. If you make accountability a part of what you're doing, like to let people know these are my goals, and make it somebody that cares enough that they're going to let you know, but they also care enough not to do it in a way that's like is harmful to your self-esteem. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That some positive encouragement goes a long way, whereas negative reinforcement doesn't work. And that's why I tell people that's the problem with the military is that they use negative reinforcement because they're not trying to build strong character. They're just trying to eliminate the weak ones.
Mhm.
They want to take 300 people, rush them through basic training in infantry school, and they're left with 150 people that can handle it. And the other 150 people they didn't care about. But as martial arts instructors, we're the opposite end of that. We're trying to take the weak ones and develop strong character, develop sharp skill sets. And you can't do that with negative reinforcement. And the problem is, so many of the people teaching martial arts learned it through the military. And that's why I said the military can take the fun of that out of absolutely everything. Look at being a paratrooper compared to skydiving. I love to go skydiving, but I would hate the military form of, being a paratrooper where everybody just runs out the door and the thing pulls your cord automatically.
My
And
grandfather was a paratrooper in World War II, and it was like 300 some people in his platoon, and only three
yeah,
people survived. They dropped in
yeah,
over enemy lines and just got massacred. So yeah, I don't think I'd want to be one of those guys.
yeah. But if you don't have an accountability partner, whether it's your spouse or somebody who works out with you, or whatever, a good thing you can do is create your to-do list and make sure that everything you're supposed to do is on there and mark them off as you complete them. And if there's something on your to-do list that you get to day 3 and 3 days in a row you didn't do it, you either need to do it or take it off the list because it wasn't important enough to you to make it part of your goals. So that's the other thing is we have to have focused goals for our accountability, because if you have too many goals, then it's like you said before, like boy trying to go for straight A's. You got to take this one step at a time, and so that's the big part. And then I'll go back to we touched on it a little bit earlier with adjusting the wake up time. But step number 6 is what I tell people for your self accountability and your self responsibility. Never touch the snooze button. And I know that goes back to the sleep part, but the first thing you do every day should not demonstrate a lack of self discipline.
Mm,
And touching the snooze button does just
yeah.
so if you made the conscious decision the night before that you're going to get up at 6:45, you hit the snooze button and don't get up till 7, and you have killed your goal.
That is so true. That is so wise. I tell my students all the time, it's not about the big battles, it's about the little battles that give you the strength to fight the big ones. And man, I'm gonna rethink that snooze. I don't use snooze very much, but I'm gonna rethink that because you're right. You're right. If you make a commitment to yourself to wake up at a certain time and then you bail on that commitment by hitting the snooze button, you really are teaching yourself to not be accountable.
Yeah. And the worst thing is it's, not being accountable to yourself. So if you can't care enough about you, how can you really care enough about your students or your family, your spouse? If you don't even care about yourself. And that was another thing that a personal trainer of mine had told me was that when we talked about what I was going through to lose the weight, and I told him, like this whole thing of drinking a gallon of water a day is like, it's tough. I just get to the point where like, I don't like the taste of it. And he just looked at me with such disappointment. He's like, Richard, if you don't have the self discipline to just drink water, how are you going to have the self discipline to accomplish anything in your life if you can't even drink water to have a better life? And I thought, oh, put the gloves back on. Those sting a little. That was kind of brutal, but it was a wake up call for me. Like, yeah, I'm the one that's being let down. I'm the one that's suffering over my conscious decision to not want to drink water. You
Mhm.
know, and that's what helped me reach like the seventh step for black belt self discipline is that um, you want to identify is what your goal is. If you want to be a martial artist, then you have to identify as one. You have to make it a big enough part of your lifestyle that it's not just 2 or 3 hours a week that you're at class, that it's day in, day out, part of who you are, part of your character, part of your personality in a very positive way. And I know this might be a little off topic, but one of my favorite things to mention to people is that they'll see a lot of people and they'll say, well, grandmaster this or grandmaster this. And I'm like, this person's an alcoholic or they're a child abuser, they're this. Those people are not grandmasters. They're just somebody who learned a bunch of moves. Because to be a master or a grandmaster, you have to have the self discipline. Because without that, like I said, you're just a jerk that learned how to hurt people. And there's no gentle way to say it. That's the fact.
Yeah.
And So I get really vocal about it sometimes, and you see it a lot in
Well,
most
I
of our
think
schools,
that
unfortunately.
that mind body training is really important, and it's something that we as a community have been kind of drifting away from in recent years, and something I'm eager to get back to. So I like hearing that. I think, yeah, you know, no one's a master of everything, but we should strive to be. And it's not just about the physical skills, it's also about the mental pursuits.
Right. So just to recap the 7 steps to black belt level discipline. Number one was to make and keep a morning promise to yourself. Number two is the anti-discipline approach, where you're removing negative things. Number three, adjust your wake up time. Start every day with an act of self-discipline. And number four, discipline through nutrition. Control what you put in your mouth, which controls your energy level for the day. Because if you start off with a bunch of sugary donuts, then 2 hours later, that sugar crash is going to hit as it runs through your system, and then you're tired again. You want to focus on energizing yourself through your nutrition. Number five is the accountability, self accountability with a to do list. And if you can, have an accountability partner, whether it's your spouse or a workout buddy, a classmate, anybody who's going to care enough to help you stay accountable. And then number six was to avoid the snooze button. Don't let yourself down. Don't be the person that is the biggest obstacle in your life. Get up and don't start your day with a lack of self discipline by snoozing. And then the seventh step is to absolutely make it who you are. If you want to be a martial artist, make that your personality, make that your character, and live by things like your school student creed, the tenets of taekwondo, all of these things, the four virtues of Shaolin, the 18 disciplines of the Wu-Dang Temple. I mean, there's so many examples through the martial arts on how we do this, and it's a very positive aspect of life. And even if coming from the European culture, if you look at like Stoic lifestyle and the warrior lifestyle through that, there's so many similarities to the code of Bushido, to the code of the Knights of the Round Table. So all of these aspects of strong moral character are universal in every culture, or they should be.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
so and I think that that's what really makes us a martial artist, the self discipline. It's not just how cool, how high and cool our sidekick is. Those are physical attributes. The act of being a martial artist starts with the self discipline. Simple things like wearing a clean uniform. Things like that go a long way. And I see instructors that are guilty of that. They take their uniform off after class and they hang it on the back of the door of the office. And then the next day they come in and they put that salty, smelly uniform back on and get out there. And it's not good emotionally. There's something internally that people experience that lowers their cognitive dissonance and their other abilities because they are self-sabotaging themselves through poor personal hygiene. And that's not, I should add that to the list, that personal hygiene should be one of the steps, for black belt level self-discipline because it's that important. And I mentioned that with like people I'm talking to about becoming instructors. You come out to every class smelling so fresh and so clean. Make sure you've either brushed your teeth or used mouthwash. You have on deodorant. You're wearing a clean uniform that doesn't have salt stains on the back and armpits from yesterday. That you lead by example. Because unless you want a room full of 30 smelly, sweaty kids that are wearing the same uniform all week long without it getting washed, you have to set the example. And as instructors, we really underestimate the impact we have on the students, that they want to be like us, they mimic us, good and bad. And I remember watching like when I would get a haircut and I would do the high and tight, the flat top military haircut. And
Mhm.
next thing I know, I got like six of the little boys showing up to class with that kind of haircut, you know, because they're influenced by our actions more than our words.
So these are some real golden nuggets, and it probably took you, a while to figure all this stuff out. What advice would you give to a new student to discover this kind of wisdom on their own? What set you on the path to learning the 7 steps for black belt level discipline?
I think that even though I listed it last, I think the vision and the identity is the first thing you have to establish. So, because like as a martial artist, I'll give you an example. I knew guys that in the 80s and 90s, they were martial artists. So like when the new phone book got delivered, I don't know if they still deliver phone books, but they would actually go and read the martial arts school ads because they were absorbing anything related to the martial arts. They watched martial arts movies, they read martial arts books. Just like people that are baseball fans are going to read, the biography of Jackie Robinson or, and things like that. As martial artists, we need to do that, incorporate it into our lifestyle because, your mind and your body connection is developed as much by the things that you put into your body emotionally, like through your reading, what kind of music you listen to, what kind of TV shows you watch. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of martial arts related TV shows focus a lot on the violence, like beating people up. If you watch like Jason Statham movies and stuff, we always love to see a good technique get pulled off. But at the same time, we don't want to let those things negatively impact us. We see that a lot in the Japanese culture, like with video games. There, these kids watch these horribly violent video games and play them, but they don't let it carry over into their daily lives and their personal behavior.
Mhm.
And so when I hear people blaming, oh, well, he's like that because we let him play video games, like, first of all, um, you shouldn't let him do that then. And secondly, that was their choice. If you choose the positive aspect of something, then you're going to do that. Just like if somebody decides they want to be a world class sprinter or runner, to compete on their high school track team, go to college, go to the Olympics, they're not going to be somebody who wants to express their lack of discipline through poor diet, right? If you want to be a top notch athlete, then of course
Yeah.
you want to have a healthy diet. And that's why we explain that a lot to the kids. We talk about, healthy snacks, that I'm sorry, even though they package it that way, 6 Oreo cookies is not a healthy snack. You know, give your child an apple or an orange or something to take to school as a snack.
Yeah.
Stop, taking the easy way out. And you put that, if you look at the marketing, they're like, look, it's only 100 calories. Yes, but it's 100 calories of sugar, right? The nutritional density of 6 Oreos is absolutely worthless to the human body, you
Mhm.
know. And there some people you'll hear these gurus on Instagram like, well, calories are calories. No, no, they're not. Because if you eat 2,000 calories of just cheese and sugar all day, you're not going to have the same energy levels as a healthy diet, you know. And I don't know how much time do we have left.
Oh, we can go for a while still, but
Okay, so one
um,
of the things that I wanted to talk about too with the lifestyle is even as instructors, we need to set goals because some people are like, well, I've got to this rank, I know it all. No, no, you don't know it all. There's so much more that people need to touch on and everything. And I'm going to say this openly that there's a reason that the instructors in Korea and Japan and China don't respect the American and European martial artists on the same level because they know that so few of them have made the effort to achieve the level of education that should be required for the rank that they're wrapping around their waist.
mhm.
And I see it all the time in the martial arts community. And I'll give you an example. So, like, there are directions of attack and angles of attack, but I hear people use the word interchangeably because they never learned it or they never absorbed it. And so this is something simple. So like the angles are like down, up, left to right down, right to left, left to right up, left to right across, right to left across, clockwise and counterclockwise. And this goes back to a level of understanding that I would say less than 1% of the martial arts masters outside of Asia even attempt to learn. And it goes back to like the 12 meridians. And a lot of people think, well, that's all hocus pocus. It's not true. I'm like, no, there's thousands of years of practice and research Asian medicine that prove this to be true. Same thing with the herbal medicine. And so if those are the angle or the directions, then the angles are to go halfway and they go one of those directions for the second part of the technique. Those are angles. These are only directions. And all of those are connected to the 12 meridians and the five elements that are affected by those directions. So, like going down is what we call the wood meridian. Okay. Going straight up goes to the fire element in meridians, and then coming in and up at those two angles or coming together across is the metal uh, element. Coming in and up is water. Down and in is earth. Clockwise is sky. Counterclockwise is universe. And so as they learn about developing key energy and these other things, they understand that, wait a minute, you mean those angles in those directions applied to my technique affect those 12 meridians of the human body? Yes, they're supposed to. But most people never touch on it in their training. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for going to these courses, instructors courses, and I blame a lot of the federations in Korea even for this. So there used to be an instructor's course, a master's course, a grandmaster's course, leadership courses, international referee courses. They had all these courses, and what do the foreigners get invited to? Maybe the instructor's course. Every now and then they invite a few to the referee course, and I remember that from the Olympic fiasco when it just goes to show that so people set the bar so low for themselves once they achieve a title, and they don't understand you never stop learning. You never stop learning. And that's the one thing that I get from my instructors. One of my instructors is 83 years old, and he's always telling me what books he's reading and what courses he's still going to review and to pick up more. And so I think, self education and self improvement is the largest part of lifestyle, continuing the journey because the journey doesn't stop till you're dead. You know, you can't get to a point and say, well, I know it all now. Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
disappointing that must be to reach a point where you think you've got nothing left to learn.
Oh, yeah. I'm always a white belt. I keep a white belt in my closet to remind me of that. There's always
Yeah.
new things to learn, and better I get at one thing, the further away I get from another thing that I may have learned in the past. And so it's always even just keeping everything fresh is a challenge, but there's an unlimited amount of things to learn. I would just say one thing, going back to what you're talking about with there being a disparity between Americans or Westerners and Koreans in skill level and things like that. I do think that's generally true, but it's because of the insane athletic system they have over there in Korea and the amount of training they're doing. Like most Americans are training a couple, and I'm not saying all. I mean, probably not you, not myself, and very serious martial artists there are out there in America, but most Americans are training a couple times a week.
Yeah.
Maybe at most like an hour a day, 5 times a week. Not most, but like, on average. But in Korea, average just like ace line is an hour a day, 5 days a week. And most real serious people who are going to be graduating from university with a degree in Taekwondo, those people are training potentially 8 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week. They are, you know, their entire life revolves around martial arts. There's nothing else in their life but martial arts. Koreans and I think all East Asians are very focused. Like whatever your path is, that's your path. When I taught Taekwondo over in Korea, one of the things that was so interesting is kids would jump into Taekwondo and they'd be like just straight, like focus, like straight ahead, all steam ahead. But then they would just jump off like immediately, and then they were all of a sudden doing, ballet or they're doing piano, and you're like, wait, what? You were just doing Taekwondo like super super seriously like 2 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this thing now? And it's because, well, I don't think I'm going to be a Taekwondo champion. So I need to find out what I'm going to be a champion in. And whatever that is, I'm going to stay super, super focused. And I think it's because of that discipline that Koreans really excel. And yeah, there are courses that are limited to Americans, and most of the there's a lot of really great opportunities that are given to Koreans, but I think more than anything, it's just their level of rigor is totally different. If you look at academia, I mean, we're almost getting pushed out in the West from our own universities because these Asians are coming over here studying so hard and achieving quite a lot. And they have the American dream almost more than we have it. Just pick yourself up by the bootstraps, make no excuses, and it's very impressive, honestly. It's something that we should learn from.
Yeah, and I think that that's a very solid point. But a lot of it too, like I said, there's so much of it beyond the physical realm. You know that no amount of push-ups or physical fitness is going to teach somebody the philosophy or the 12 meridians or the five elements or any of those things and how they connect and intertwine. And a lot of that is that because people misinterpret the and I see people now, I think the saddest thing I see are people in their 50s and 60s still competing. And I think what it is they lack the next step of the process. You start off as the protected, where you know nothing. So your parents and your teachers and big brothers and sisters all look out for you and protect you. And then the next level is the guardian, where you start to learn some skills where you're good enough to protect yourself and your family. And then after that is the warrior stage. People like law enforcement, military, martial arts instructors, that they have the skill level to help protect the entire community. And then after that is the scholar stage, where you've passed the physical realm and you're moving into learning all of the other aspects like the philosophy and the other things, the healing aspects. I know in the Hapkido organization I belong to, you won't find anybody at sixth dan or seventh dan that doesn't already have like 3 years of natural medicine studies, through herbal studies and acupuncture, acupressure. And I know that for legal reasons, a lot of that training here is limited. You have to be very careful about what you do in practice, but it just shows a difference in the focus. And I'm like, and when you get to that point where you're like, why am I still doing this phase? Why am I not pursuing the next stage? And especially in the last stage, the scholar phase, I mean, we're talking about a lot of it is self study through books and programs. And so there's no reason not to do it, whether even if you have a back injury or a bad knee, you can still do these things and still have it be part of your life and your lifestyle. And I think that the dropout rate that you were talking about, like people realizing I'm never going to be a champion, that's a marketing mistake. If they would, promote Taekwondo as a lifestyle and not just, oh, you can become an Olympic champion. No, 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 you cannot. And first of all, on the US team, how many people do they take the Olympics? Four, eight, how many? Right? So out
Yeah,
of the
I don't know the
hundreds
exact
of
number.
thousands of people doing Taekwondo in the United States,
Mhm.
only eight are going to get to go to the Olympics. So why are they trying to make that the goal of 100,000 people, including stay-at-home moms and CEOs and whatever? It's impractical, and it does such a disservice to the art to only make it about the competition when there's so many more benefits to be had through the martial arts.
Well, I think that is somewhat true. They are really focused on competition, at least in Taekwondo these days. But I think it goes beyond that. I think their society is all about you have a path, and that's what a do is. And when I first learned from my master the word do, he said it means path, and I thought, oh, like a winding path through the forest with no beginning and end, a kind of this transcendental experience. No, no, no. A path means this is an accepted thoroughfare that you can go down with benchmarks and support behind it, and you can dedicate your whole life to this thing. And it's actually because Taekwondo is a path that if you do Taekwondo, you have to go full bore and do nothing else. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to compete, but like you're gonna be, waking up in the morning and climbing up the mountain to meditate at a summit, and like you're gonna make your entire life martial arts. And that part of Korean culture I really do like. I think in the West we have this idea of the Renaissance man. They do not have that idea in the East. This idea that you can be good at many different things and we have liberal arts education. That's a very Western mindset. Koreans are, what am I going to be doing? And I'm going to learn the skills to do that job. And so these are very, very different approaches, and there's pros and cons to both. We are very creative in the West. It's because of that liberal arts education, that, Renaissance man idea, like trying different things and getting these ideas and juxtaposing them and coming up with new ideas. Whereas in Asia, it's like, well, how has this been for centuries? I got to figure out what the mold is, and then I got to fit into the mold. And only then, when I've mastered the mold, can I add my extra little 10 cents. And so it's just different mindsets. But yeah. I think we've gone a little off our original topic here.
Yeah, I
Uh,
know, but it's an important topic. You brought
yeah,
up some really great points, and like I said, I just think that at some point, though, you have to realize that if you've capped out as a competitor, maybe it's time to become a coach. Maybe it's time to mentor others. You know what I mean?
yeah.
But like I said, to be in your 50s and 60s and still wanting to physically
So
dominate another human being to prove your self-worth
let me ask you this.
is the saddest thing I've heard.
You don't agree with, people who are in the 50s and 60s who are masters and been training a long time going out there and trying to push themselves at competition?
Oh, absolutely. Push yourselves through whatever you're doing, whether it's demonstrations or whatever. But I think that you have to reach a point morally, especially if you're a real master, you have uh, lethal level skills. And are you willing to take that risk applying lethal level skills against another human being for the masturbation of your ego? There's something behind that that's inherently wrong. And that's why there's the four stages of the path,
Well,
and this is universal to all good martial arts. And I didn't make this up. And believe me, I was good. And it hurt my feelings for me to realize, well, there's going to come a day that I need to become the teacher and
yeah.
not just the competitor. And there are other ways to test yourself and to push your limits. It doesn't have to be through the physical domination of another human being,
This reminds
especially at the risk of
yeah.
life and limb and injuries.
This reminds me so much of two different experiences I had growing up in the martial arts. So I trained first under Grandmaster Kwan, who was a world champion and the U.S. national team coach and just a fantastic Taekwondoin. But he never really sparred us. He may work with me a little bit, like kind of joking around, but he would never like seriously try to spar me. And then I worked under another guy, Grandmaster Scott Lewandowski, who also a fantastic martial artist and actually taught me more about the ins and outs of the technical aspects of kicking and punching than even Grandmaster Kwan did. But he would spar me and he would try to beat me. And we would go back and forth a lot because at that time in my life I'd already trained for 10 years, so I was a pretty experienced martial artist. And there was this sense of competition on the mats. It reminded me a lot of, most of the BJJ schools that I've been at, or even more like that. They're, dog eat dog world. You gotta, fight your way up through the wolf pack to get to the top, and everyone's coming for everybody. And I agree that it creates a kind of caustic environment. And one of the beauties of Master Kwan's approach was that I felt like I was sort of in his embrace and I could let my guard down, I could be myself, and he would support me no matter what. And I think that that's kind of resonating with what you're talking about. I think that's true. You got to at some point take the higher path. On the other side of this is as I've gotten older, it's harder for me to get the hours in that I used to. I mean, I used to train 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. I'm not doing that anymore. I don't have time for that. I have kids and responsibilities, my business, and all this kind of stuff. But I have to keep up my skills because if I don't keep up my skills, then I won't be able to really pass on the knowledge in the same powerful way. And so I am continuing to train as much as I can. And I mostly the partners that I have are my students, my high level students. And so I do work in with them. I feel like it is a balance between these two things. And we're talking about competition. Now, I don't have much left to prove because I've already been training 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and competed at a high level. I'm not going to be able to train at that level again. So I'm not anticipating that I'm going to be able to reach a higher level at an older age. But I do see people go out there from time to time who are my age or older, who are competing, who have been training their whole lives. And I say, what an inspiration. These guys are going out there risking, getting some egg on their face to um, try to show by example, leadership by example, what it means to be a competitor. And if they can go out there with, a good-natured heart, I mean, I think it's a powerful thing, and I wouldn't discourage anyone for doing that. I just think I agree with what you're saying, though. I think it is a balance, and you need to, at the end of the day, not just let this be about your ego. You have to know when to support your teammates. Like you don't think about, what's weird about martial arts is we like if I was a football coach, you wouldn't say, "Oh, I could beat your football coach," if you were a player, right?
Yeah.
No, you
And,
you
and
you
that's a
say
big part of my point is that in no other field of endeavor do they do that. Is there anybody who would say that the coach of the Dallas Cowboys isn't
has to beat the
knowledgeable
players.
because he can't get out on the field and play during the Super Bowl? No, only in the martial arts is that narrow mind existence, because other people realize that there's a level of knowledge that goes and you should continue. That's part of the lifelong path. And that's why I see such a breakdown. I see people quit. And I'm like, you don't quit a lifestyle. If you were a martial artist, you find ways to keep going at whatever ability level you have and to pursue whatever level of knowledge you're trying to reach. And for me, like I got bored on early on with the competition because, first of all, I weighed like 143 to 147 pounds on average while I was in the military. And so everybody in my division was a Korean. And I got pretty cocky because I was like, I never lost to a Korean ever. And I lost to some Korean referees. I can tell you that. I got some, I was declared the loser, or the other person was declared the winner only because I was beaten by the referees, not scoring things that I did. But at the same time, I still remember there's a guy that's one of my Facebook friends that he was a Jeet Kune Do instructor in Korea, and at the time he was a red belt when we were competing, and I lost to him, and I was like, man, that was a new thing. Now I got to ride the bus home as a loser with the other guys from our school. But when later on, when I found out this guy was actually a Jeet Kune Do instructor, he had been an amateur boxer before joining the military. So he had a different level of skill sets that I wasn't used to dealing with. But it was a very humbling experience, but it made me realize there's more to the path, you know? And if this is all I'm going to be, do I really want to continue, you know? So I know I got a little off topic there, but I think it's a difference in philosophy more than
So
a difference in,
I think what's really important is and I got this train going by. I'm so sorry.
no, no,
But there's something called the black belt complex, which is once you start getting some rank, it's really easy to remove yourself from the crucible that forged you into the person that you are. And I mean, you're talking a lot about that. Today we were talking about the 7 steps to black belt level discipline. And it's really easy for people to become like the master or the grandmaster or just a high level black belt. And then, stop doing the things that they're teaching their students to do. Stop getting up at 4:30 in the morning and, eating right and all these really important leadership characteristics. And one of the things I see a lot in the martial arts is once you get your black belt, you always have to win. There's this expectation, which I think is unreasonable. I think it's totally unreasonable, but it is
Yeah,
unfortunately the truth. And even my students will be like, as soon as they get their black belt, like, wow, I didn't realize the pressure. There's so much pressure being a black belt. Like I always have to
yeah,
win. And it's like, yeah, it's unreasonable, but that's, how people just view it. And because of that, a lot of black belts step off the mats and don't put themselves out there. And I think it's understandable in some way. I think you should try to put yourself out there as much as you can. But yeah, it's definitely a balance. You really got to try to continue to do the things that you did to get to where you are, or you will
right.
lose that. You will lose that if you stop.
Yeah, I do understand that. Use it or lose it. And but yeah, like I said, I think part of it is just the philosophy, because I was so far one direction in my earlier years of training, and then when I realized it, oh my God, I'm missing so much more. That
Hmm.
I wanted to continue that, to continue the journey, and realize that it's a lifelong journey. That the learning doesn't end until you stop breathing. And I
That's
think
true.
that once you take the approach that I know it all, then I would feel sad if I thought I reached the point that I know enough that I can quit doing martial arts. I think that would be devastating to my identity, because it's such a big part of who I am.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just the ego talking. No one can know everything. No one can be the best.
Yeah,
And even if you are the best, and even if you did know everything, you would really damage yourself by thinking those things because then
yeah.
your cup is full, and you can't grow anymore. So, um, it's just better to always humble yourself and no matter how big you get and actually the bigger you get the more humble you must become because your ego gets kind of out of control. My master told me this saying. He says the tallest blade of grass or wheat hangs its head the lowest, because the head gets heavier and as it gets taller it bends it over. And it reminds us that the more proficient we become, the more humble we must be. It's really easy to get a big ego when you
Yeah,
get
I'm,
more
I'm gonna have to
proficient,
remember that. I like that
you
about
know?
the
So you
tallest.
you almost have to tell yourself like, "Ooh, hold on, that sounded kind of arrogant. Like that's not how a normal person talks." And if you don't do that, if you're not actively doing that, it can get away from you. Same thing with aggression. Like the more you fight physically, the more you're gonna want to handle things physically. Look at fighting dogs. That's why you have to be really careful. Don't go all fire. Because you look at like fighting dogs or fighting animals that just get thrown into a cage, they can't even be rehabilitated. They're so dark, they're so hard, right? And so we say 1 foot in the fire, Rise of Phoenix Martial Arts, keep 1 foot in the fire because you want to be able to hop into the fire a little bit and then hop out into a safe and warm environment that's going to nurture you and then hop back in and out. If you just stay in the fire, you're going to become like the wolves that attack the flock, not a sheepdog who protects it. You have to be a little bit balanced. Um, yeah.
I'm gonna ask you to do me a personal favor. If you could share that quote about the tallest shaft of wheat or the tallest blade of grass
Hmm.
bends its head the lowest. I think that that's really something that more people need to hear and think about. If you could
Yeah.
make a Facebook post about that, that would be really cool.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, like I said, I know we went a little longer than planned, but I'm glad we did. We covered a lot of stuff that was just kind of a learning experience for me as well. And I appreciate that about being on the show.
Yes,
And like I
sir.
said, I really don't want anybody to underestimate how much I appreciate getting to be a guest, on the podcast and share with everyone. And if anyone has a comment about anything that I said, or they want to share an insight, or even if you want to explain to me why I'm wrong, please leave it in the comments. I love to learn new things, and that's one of the ways we do it.
Yeah, well, I think knowledge and wisdom is made in the conversations that we have. We are 50% how we think we are inside our head and 50% how we're perceived outside of us. And if we don't have conversations, we can easily become 100% internal. And not a healthy place to be. That's how you become detached from reality. And so when I have conversations with people, like sometimes I have these amazing ideas. I'm like, this is so good. I've been thinking of this idea for like 10 years. And then I'll have a conversation about it, like, wow, that was a really bad idea. And I've had it for 10 years and I've been building onto it and I thought it was so good, but it was not good. I couldn't even
Yeah,
couldn't be pressure test in a conversation, you know? So that's why I love having conversations. And the more that we have these, the more we learn, the more we can tease out those little golden nuggets like we got today with those 7 amazing steps, right? And, I asked you earlier in our conversation, like, how do you get those golden nuggets? How do you find them? And I think you're right when you said it starts with that identity. I'm a martial artist. And not just that, not just I'm a martial artist, but I'm going to live those warrior virtues and I'm going to start having those conversations like the conversations we're having right now. And in those moments, I'm going to find the truth.
absolutely.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sitting through the show here. And I hope that you got something out of it. If you have ideas or thoughts for future shows, please leave those in the comments and like and share this video with your friends who would enjoy it.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for coming on, Grandmaster Hackworth. I'm wishing you the best in everything. And we'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.